The soft rustle of straw and the rhythmic swish of Hiwot's fingers weaving through the colorful strands echoed through the small tukul hut nestled at the edge of Lake Tana. Morning light filtered through the papyrus roof, casting shadows across the intricate patterns of baskets spread around her. Each weave carried a purpose, a silent prayer. She sat cross-legged, hunched slightly, her hands never stopping. The scent of dried grass and incense lingered in the air. Outside, birds chirped, and the town of Bahir Dar slowly woke up. But inside their modest home, time moved differently, marked by the pace of her mother's breath and the completion of each basket. Hiwot's mother, Senate, lay on a thin mat a few feet away, wrapped in a faded shawl, her face lined with both age and illness. Tuberculosis had drained her vitality, leaving her coughing and weak. Medicines were expensive, and visits to the city hospital even more so. Hiwot's weaving had become more than tradition, it was survival. At just 17, she bore the weight of their household with a quiet dignity, waking before dawn, attending school during the day and weaving late into the night. She sold her baskets at the weekend market, where tourists admired the craftsmanship but haggled down the price. That Saturday, with a bundle of baskets balanced in a kuta cloth over her shoulder, Hiwot walked toward the market square. The road was bustling, women selling injera from woven trays, children chasing goats, old men playing jabita under a fig tree. Jonas spotted her from his father's spice stall, his hands dusted with turmeric, a crooked smile lighting up his face. He called out, "Hiwot, still making the best baskets in Tana?" She blushed but didn't stop. Jonas always had a way of teasing without mockery. He was her closest friend at school, always helping with assignments, encouraging her when the nights got too long. Lately, there was something gentler in his eyes, something unspoken that trembled at the edges of their friendship. At the market, Hiwot set her basket display beside the steps of the old Orthodox church. A tourist couple approached, a woman with a wide-brimmed hat and a man with a camera dangling from his neck. The woman knelt, tracing her fingers along the rim of a blue and gold woven bowl. "These are stunning. Who made them?" Hiwot smiled politely. "I did. All handmade." The man raised his brows. "You ever think of selling in bulk? These would fly off shelves in the US." Hiwot's heart skipped. "I've never thought that far," she replied. But the words lingered in her mind as they walked away, leaving behind 2 notes of bare and compliments. That evening Jonas joined her on the way home, pushing his bike beside him. "You look distracted today," he said. "Is everything okay?" Hiwot hesitated, then told him about the couple. "What if I could sell more? Support my mother better? Maybe even save for university?" Jonas nodded slowly. "That's a beautiful dream. But just don't let anyone turn your work into plastic. Your baskets tell stories. Don't let the story get lost." His voice was gentle but firm, the way only someone who truly cared could sound. Hiwot didn't sleep well that night. Her mother's cough had worsened, and the moonlight cast long shadows that looked like roads she hadn't dared walk yet. The idea of mass production danced at the edge of her thoughts. Freedom, ease, maybe even success. But so did the warning in Jonas's words. She reached for the half-finished basket beside her bed and ran her fingers over the tight coils. Each loop held a memory, her grandmother's lessons, her mother's smile, the village traditions whispered into every strand. A week later they returned. The tourist man introduced himself as Mr. Adler, an investor in fair trade goods. "I've got contacts," he said, handing her a business card with a gold logo. "We can scale your production, pay you triple what you make here. You won't be sitting on a mat selling 10 a day. You'll be running a brand." His words glittered like coin in sunlight. Hiwot stared at the card. It was crisp, foreign, and full of promise. She felt herself drifting toward it. Jonas was quiet when she told him. "And what about school? What about your dream of becoming an architect?" he asked. Hiwot looked down. "Maybe this is a different dream. Maybe it's the only one I can afford." His jaw tightened. "You can't buy your worth, Hiwot. That's something no foreigner can export." She wanted to cry, not because he was angry but because he wasn't. He was disappointed, and that hurt worse. That night, Hiwot sat beside her mother, who clutched her hand weakly. "I heard you had a visitor," Senate murmured. "A rich man?" Hiwot nodded. "He wants to help me sell more baskets." Her mother smiled faintly. "Just remember, child, not all money feeds the soul. But stories do. Don't lose your soul to feed your belly." The words sank deep, like dye into straw. The next morning Hiwot returned to the church steps. She looked at the baskets laid before her, not just items but pieces of herself. She had decisions to make. A world was calling, but so was her home. The thread between them stretched taut, and it was just beginning to fray. Hiwot stood before the mirror shard nailed to the mud wall, adjusting the scarf around her shoulders. Her reflection stared back, uncertain, thoughtful. The card from Mr. Adler lay on the floor beneath the mirror. She had memorized the bold text, Ethiopian Global, where tradition meets opportunity. That morning, her mother was too weak to speak, only offering a squeeze of her hand and a cough that rattled like dry leaves. Hiwot left her a pot of ginger tea and some injera before heading out, the card burning a hole in her pocket. She skipped the market and instead walked to the Bahir Dar lodge, where Mr. Adler and his team were staying. Her feet moved fast, but her heart dragged behind. The guards at the gate let her in after she showed them the card. Inside, everything gleamed, white umbrellas shading glass tables, foreigners sipping strong coffee, walls hung with abstract art that reminded her of broken baskets. A receptionist in a navy dress led her to the back garden, where Mr. Adler sat behind a laptop, phone in one hand, espresso in the other. "Hiwot, just the young woman I wanted to see," he said, standing to greet her. "Sit. You want tea, coffee, juice?" She declined politely and sat stiffly. He launched into a speech about market trends, e-commerce platforms, and supply chains. "We'll pay you up front. You don't even need to weave everything yourself. We'll get women from other villages. You just lead. Design. Build a brand around your name." He beamed like he was offering gold. "It's time Ethiopia exports culture, not just coffee." Hiwot listened, nodding. The idea of her name on something global gave her goosebumps. "But I still want to study," she said. "I have exams. University applications. My mother." "All of that can still happen," he interrupted. "With money you can study anywhere. You could even go to London. We have partners in the UK. You'd be a founder, a businesswoman. Isn't that what every girl dreams of now?" She didn't respond. Her dreams had always involved blueprints, not branding. But the thought of being able to afford her mother's medicine, pay school fees, and maybe even hire someone to help, that was power. When she returned home, Jonas was waiting outside with his bike leaning against their fence. His face brightened when he saw her, but quickly faded to concern. "You didn't come to school," he said. "I went to see Mr. Adler," she admitted. "He offered me a real deal. Not just compliments, actual money. I could support my mother, maybe even leave." Jonas took a deep breath. "And what do you have to give up?" She frowned. "Why do you always do that? Can't you be happy for me just once?" "I am happy for you," he said, voice rising. "But I know you. You're not weaving for profit. You weave for meaning. If this man turns your baskets into factory output, what's left of your story?" She turned away, blinking hard. "Maybe stories don't matter when your mother's dying, Jonas?" That silenced him. The weight of her words hung between them like fog. He looked down. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to," she shook her head. "I know. But I have to do what's right for her." That night, she dreamed of her hands moving faster than she could think, the baskets multiplying until they filled rooms she didn't recognize. In her dream, her mother smiled from a hospital bed in London, while strangers picked up her baskets in glossy stores, their price tags shining brighter than the patterns. When she woke, the dream felt like both a warning and a prophecy. School felt different the next day. Whispers followed her. Someone had seen her at the lodge. Her economics teacher congratulated her. A few classmates envied her. Jonas kept his distance. They hadn't spoken since the argument. Hiwot missed his laugh during break, his quiet encouragement during math class. She tried to focus, but the numbers blurred. At lunch, she sat alone under the jacaranda tree where they used to share roasted corn. She traced circles in the dust with her thumb, thinking. 2 days later, Mr. Adler brought his assistant, a fast-talking woman named Rachel, to visit Hiwot's home. They took photos of her baskets, asked about production capacity, even measured the tukel for lighting and space. Rachel pulled out a contract. "Just basic terms," she said. "You sign, we start. Advance in your account within 48 hours. Hiwot scanned the document. It was thick, full of clauses, full of English. She wasn't sure what she was signing. "Do I get to decide how many baskets I make?" she asked. Rachel smiled tightly. "Technically, you'll be in charge of quality control. But production schedules will come from our side. Efficiency is key, you understand." Hiwot nodded slowly. "And what if I change my mind later?" Rachel paused. "We have a minimum term agreement. 12 months. But trust me, you won't want to stop once you see your first payment." The pen in her hand felt heavier than her future. She signed. The money came fast. Within 2 days, her mother had her first dose of imported antibiotics. A private nurse visited. Her mother was able to sit up and sip porridge again. Hiwot bought more straw, hired 2 women from her neighborhood to help. She wore a new headscarf to school. Her teachers praised her confidence. But Jonas still wouldn't meet her eyes. The silence between them stretched into something brittle. A week later, her baskets arrived at the lodge in large boxes. Mr. Adler smiled. "These are perfect. This is the beginning, Hiwot. Next shipment we double." She forced a smile. She should have felt joy. But she felt tired. On the way home, she stopped at the jacaranda tree. Jonas sat there, sketching in his notebook. She hesitated, then sat beside him. "I signed," she said. "I know," he replied, not looking up. "You've changed." "I'm trying to survive," she whispered. He turned to her, then, eyes softer. "I know. But I wish you'd believed your dreams were already enough." The breeze carried the scent of wanza blossoms through the air. For the first time, she wondered if survival and surrender might look too similar from a distance. The days after Hiwot signed the contract moved like dust in Harmattan, fast and dry, leaving little room to breathe. Every morning began with checklists and ended with exhaustion. Her small tukul, once a peaceful place of craft and care, now buzzed with activity. Women she barely knew sat cross-legged around the room, weaving the patterns she drew hastily on paper, chattering as they rushed to meet quotas. Her mother's cough had lessened, the medicine doing its job, but Hiwot felt no relief. Instead, she felt stretched, like old straw that split too easily. The first bulk shipment had already been picked up by Mr. Adler's team, and they had returned with glowing reviews. "Your pieces were a hit in Cape Town," Rachel had said, flipping through glossy photographs of Hiwot's baskets on white shelves. "People are calling it Afro-minimalism. It's trending." She didn't even know what that meant. Her designs, carefully inherited from generations of weavers in her family, were never meant to be trending. They were meant to tell stories. At school, the change in Hiwot was obvious. She still sat in her usual spot near the window, but her notebooks were filled more with diagrams and order plans than class notes. Teachers commended her ambition, classmates envied her success. But Jonas? He was silent. Not rude, just distant. He no longer walked her home. No more jokes shared at the market. If their eyes met, it was only briefly, with a sadness neither could admit. One afternoon, after a long day of coordinating with her weaving assistants, Hiwot passed by Jonas sketching under the jacaranda tree. She slowed, tempted to sit beside him like before. He didn't look up. His pencil moved steadily over the page. She forced herself to keep walking, the ache in her chest deepening with each step. When she returned home, her mother was resting comfortably. Hiwot sat by the door and began weaving, not to fulfill an order, but to think. Her fingers moved instinctively through the straw. The feel of the material under her hands was grounding, familiar. She had missed the slowness, the intimacy of it. But now she had deadlines. Baskets weren't sacred anymore. They were inventory. Units. Products. A soft knock interrupted her rhythm. One of the women she'd hired, Mescarum, stood hesitantly at the entrance. "Hiwot, some of the others are worried. The new straw from the distributor, it's splitting easily. The quality is low. But Rachel says we must use it to stay on schedule." Hiwot stood. "Where's the damaged batch?" Mescarum led her to a corner where baskets with jagged edges lay piled. Hiwot touched one. It felt dry and brittle. "She says people won't notice. That overseas customers care more about color than strength," Mescarum added. "But we do. It's our name on it too." Hiwot's stomach turned. She remembered what Jonas had said, about meaning being more important than mass. She looked at the flawed baskets, then at Mescarum. "You're right," she said quietly. "I'll talk to them." The next morning, Hiwot called Rachel. "We need better straw. The last batch is compromising the quality." Rachel's voice crackled through the phone. "Hiwot, I get it. But if we delay production again, Adler might pull out. These deals are time-sensitive. Nobody's going to return a basket over a broken weave. Just meet the quota." "But that's not how we do things here," Hiwot argued. "I don't want to sacrifice our standards." Rachel sighed. "This is business. You want to make impact? Then grow up and make compromises." Hiwot hung up. The phone felt heavier than ever in her hand. She stood in her workshop, watching her team weave quickly, some humming quietly, others frowning over faulty straw. She wanted to scream. Instead, she walked out into the street, headed for the one place she felt she could breathe, the jacaranda tree. Jonas was there, of course. He always was. When he saw her approach, he didn't smile. "Back from the factory?" he asked. "It's not a factory," she said, sitting down beside him. "At least it's not supposed to be." He looked at her fully then. "But it is now. Isn't it?" She hesitated. "I thought it would feel like victory. But I just feel hollow." Jonas nodded slowly. "You signed away your voice. And I think you know it. I just wanted to help my mother. I wanted to survive. And I wanted you to thrive," he said softly. "But what's the point of survival if you lose the soul of what you love?" They sat in silence as the purple blossoms fell like gentle rain around them. Back at home that evening, Hiwot looked at the baskets waiting for shipment. She picked one up and pressed it to her chest. "What have I done to you?" she whispered. Her mother, who had woken to find her weeping, gently stroked her back. "Child, you are more than your mistakes. But only you can unmake them." The next morning, Hiwot made a decision. She called Rachel again. "If you want to continue working with me, I choose the materials. I choose the pace. No more shortcuts." Rachel sounded annoyed. "And if we say no?" "Then I go back to selling at the church steps," Hiwot said. "But I'll still have my story." There was a pause. Then a click. Hiwot stared at the phone, heart racing. Outside, the jacaranda tree bloomed. The call from Rachel never came back. For 3 days, Hiwot heard nothing. No emails. No follow-ups. The silence was loud, echoing in the corners of her tukul and curling under her skin. Her weaving assistants noticed the change. They whispered among themselves, unsure whether the business was collapsing or merely pausing. Hiwot tried to hold her composure, but doubt crept in like a slow fog. Without Adler's orders, there were no immediate funds coming in. Hiwot knew what that meant. Her mother's next medicine purchase would need to come from their dwindling savings. The newly hired women expecting payments would ask soon. Her fingers itched to weave again, but her mind was too busy unraveling. She sat in the middle of the compound one evening, watching the sun disappear behind the eucalyptus trees, feeling the weight of every decision she'd made. When she finally gathered the courage to go to the market again, not to sell but to clear her head, she ran into Jonas. He was sketching on a stone bench by the fountain, drawing the old Orthodox church from memory. She stood silently before him until he noticed her shadow stretching over his page. He looked up, not surprised. "Still quiet in the factory?" he asked. "No more orders," she admitted. He nodded once, closing his sketchbook. "What are you going to do?" Hiwot sighed. "I don't know. Everyone expected me to rise like lightning. Now I've become smoke." "You're not smoke," he said, standing. "You're fire. But maybe it's time you stop waiting for foreign winds to carry your flames." They walked slowly through the streets of Bahir Dar. Women sold hot buna under faded umbrellas, kids ran barefoot through the dust. Life, unbothered by missed contracts, carried on. When Hiwot got home, she found her mother sitting up, smiling. "There's a woman who came earlier," she said. "Said she wanted to learn from you." "Learn?" "Basket weaving. She saw one of your old pieces in a tourist shop in town. Said she's never seen anything like it." Hiwot sat down slowly. A thought formed, not loud, not shiny like Adler's promises, but warm, steady. What if she taught? By the end of the week, 3 girls and 1 boy sat on low stools in Hiwot's compound, each holding a small bundle of straw, each looking up at her with expectation. "This is how my grandmother taught me," she said, picking up a reed. "You don't begin with your hands. You begin with your heart." The boy Kifl frowned. "What does that mean?" Hiwot smiled. "It means you decide what story you want to tell before you touch the straw." They started slowly, awkwardly. The student's fingers fumbled, splitting reeds, tangling edges. Hiwot corrected gently. The air was filled with laughter and sometimes frustration, but always curiosity. Her mother watched from her mat, chuckling whenever someone accidentally flung a reed into the air. Hiwot began spending her mornings teaching and her evenings weaving a few pieces herself. She returned to the market not with stacks of identical baskets but with 5, maybe 6, each different, each alive. The foreign tourists stopped. So did locals. A visiting French woman bought one for 5 times the asking price. "It's art," she said. "Not craft." That week, she made more than she'd earned during her highest month with Adler. Word spread. The city's cultural center called her in for a meeting. "We're curating a new exhibit on women artisans of Lake Tana," the director said. "Would you be interested in contributing?" Hiwot blinked. "As in, show my baskets?" The woman smiled. "As in, tell your story." Jonas found her afterward, sitting by the lake with her shoes off. "You look lighter," he said. I think I am, she replied. I stopped chasing someone else's version of success. Jonas nodded, sitting beside her. You finally sound like yourself again. The Addis invitation came unexpectedly, a letter with a government seal and gold-trimmed paper. The Ministry of Culture was hosting a national fair, and Hiwot had been selected to present her weaving process in the artisan showcase. We were given your name by the Bahir Dar cultural team, the letter read. Your commitment to storytelling through craft sets you apart. Hiwot read the letter twice, then handed it to her mother, who let out a breathless laugh. You going to Addis? My daughter, the capital's guest of honor. The community rallied. Neighbors donated fabric for her dresses. Jonas helped her design a booth layout using cardboard and charcoal sketches. Her students wrote letters of encouragement and wove a banner that read, Hiwot's hands. Bahir Dar's voice. In Addis Ababa, she stood nervously between booths of glass bead jewelry, intricate silverwork and leather shoes. Her booth was modest, a collection of hand-woven baskets, a timeline of her journey and a live weaving demo. People gathered. Her hands moved slowly at first, but as she spoke, about the soul of patterns, the stories behind colors, the strength of women who weave in silence, her confidence grew. Cameras flashed. Journalists scribbled. A tall woman in a blue suit handed her a card. I run a cultural exchange program in Germany. Ever thought of teaching abroad? Hiwot smiled. I used to think I had to leave to matter. Now I think, I matter because I stayed. Later that evening, standing on a hotel balcony overlooking the sparkling city lights, she called Jonas. I wish you were here, she said. I am, he replied. In every reed you wove. When Hiwot returned to Bahir Dar, a crowd welcomed her at the market gates. There were dancers, ululations, and a giant sign that read, Our storyteller comes home. She laughed, teary-eyed, hugging old women and excited children. Her mother, leaning on a cane, kissed her forehead. You brought light with you, child. Hiwot expanded her studio. She began receiving letters from girls in rural villages who wanted to learn weaving. Some had dropped out of school. Some were mothers. Some were survivors. I heard you teach with your heart, one letter said. Can you teach mine too? She started a small residency program, 1 week of free training, food and stay. The city council donated a nearby hall. Volunteers cooked meals. Local businesses offered straw. Jonas began teaching architecture workshops beside her studio. It's funny, he said one day, you weave baskets. I weave buildings. But it's all storytelling, isn't it? Hiwot looked at him, the sun setting golden behind his profile. And you're the chapter one didn't know I needed. He took her hand. Months later, Hiwot's first solo exhibition opened in the Bahir Dar Cultural Museum. It was titled, The Basket Remembers. Each piece was arranged like a poem. One told of her mother's illness. Another, her journey through greed and back to grace. One special basket, smaller than the rest with a broken weave sealed with gold thread, sat in a glass case titled, Mistake Made Whole. Visitors walked slowly. Some wept. Some stood silently. In the final room, a basket spun slowly on a motorized pedestal. Around it were words woven into straw, not for sale. A man from a Nairobi gallery asked to buy it. She said no. It's a lesson, she explained. Not merchandise. Hiwot and Jonas married in a quiet lakeside ceremony. Her mother walked her down a path of rose petals with the help of her cane. Her students wove the decorations. The vows were whispered. The love, loud in its silence. Together they opened a joint art tech space named Thread and Stone, where craftspeople and architects could design together, fusing tradition and innovation. Tourists visited. So did diplomats. A Ghanaian designer offered collaboration. An American university offered Hiwot a visiting professorship. She declined the move abroad. I'm rooted here, she told Jonas. This is where my voice began. This is where it will echo. Years later, a young girl tapped Hiwot on the arm at the Bahir Dar market. Are you the woman who made the not-for-sale basket? She asked, eyes wide. Hiwot smiled. Yes. I want to weave like you. She bent down, handing the girl her own reed. Then you already do. She walked on, past the church steps where she once sold her first baskets, past the lodge that promised the world, past the jacaranda tree where love first bloomed. In her hand was a basket. Not for profit. Not for fame. Just a gift, for the lake, the soil, the story. And herself.